So as she mentioned in the intro, I'm here to interview you, so I will talk as little as possible. But just quickly, tell us a little bit about yourself, Omar. It would be helpful for everybody to know a little about you.
Hi everyone, my name is Omar Taubel. I'm the CEO of a company called Voicera. We build an in-meeting AI assistant that helps you be more productive at work.
And prior to Voicera,
yes,
I'm going to lead the witness.
I started a company called BlueKai, which built a data marketplace and a data management platform. And a few years ago, Oracle acquired it. And I was talking to kind of the team I had back at Oracle just a few days ago, and they've now reached a penetration of 197 of the top 200 marketers in the country use the solution and the data.
So a little bit of history. So I was lucky to be an investor in Omar's prior company and sat on the board and worked with him for 6 or 7 years, and it was a phenomenal run. And so one of the things, I think you probably have a lot of folks here who are interested in AI and different areas around AI. How did you go from building software in kind of the marketing and data space to focusing on AI? And I know this has been a 2 or 3 year progression for you, but give everybody a little bit of the history and how you came to where you are now.
Yeah, so there are two or three things that drove it. The first is that what was really interesting about the BlueKai marketplace is it powered data behind the entire ad ecosystem. Like a huge number of the players use our data. So if we were driving about, I won't quote exact numbers, but just say roughly 500 million of activity around the data use, that was actually powering about 5 billion in revenue on the ad ecosystem itself, riding on top of the data. So I started to realize that a lot of the power of capturing the economic value starts to be built when you build the end-to-end solution on top of the data. So that was one thing, of course, I was acutely aware of. And I started to think about how to apply AI outside of advertising to impact everybody's life. And before I left Oracle, I was experimenting with ideas about productivity and AI for quite some time. And started prototyping, assistants that would look at your calendar and your email and do all these super interesting things. And I actually had an app, and I'd use it every day, and I thought it was cool.
And I wanted it. You showed it to me. I said, I'd love to use that.
And I wouldn't take investor money for it for one simple reason. If you're going to build an AI startup, you want to have some sort of proprietary data advantage, or at least a chance of getting one. And half of the calendar and email in the world sits at Google, and the other half at Microsoft. So I kept on thinking to myself, no matter how badass my app is going to be, these two companies would still have this incredible built-in data advantage. So I started to think about another domain, which was voice. And voice, 99.999% of all voice conversations in the enterprise are undigitized. They're not sitting in a system of record, and nobody has data advantage. That spelled white space opportunity for me, and that's when kind of Voicera was born.
Yeah, I think maybe. So how many folks in the room are entrepreneurs? Okay, so one of the things I think is interesting, and Omar is being a little bit modest. He sold his last company for several $100 million, a very successful outcome for him and all of his investors. But you went through a couple of years of iteration. I mean, you showed me 2 or 3 different versions of apps you were thinking about and plugging away until you sort of got to where you are today about a year ago. Just share with folks a little bit, and then we'll dive into more deep tech and AI, but just share with folks, because we have folks here who are entrepreneurs that maybe might appreciate some of the insights that you gleaned as to how you thought about that, why you didn't raise money, how you pulled the team together, because you have a kick-ass team you're working with today.
Oh yeah, thank you. So once we decided to focus on voice, we started prototyping. Got my team together basically January of last year. The guy who became my CTO was running the applied AI group at Facebook, reporting to Jan LeCun. Having him helped, because then we could hire other people. We managed to pull people out of Google, out of Microsoft, out of Facebook,
and this is
Apple.
Before you'd raised any money, really. I mean, this was people coming to work with you and kind of believing in the idea of where you guys want to go.
That's right, and then we raised the money pretty fast, and that was a seed round, and then we moved to a Series A about now. Can't get into all the details because we haven't announced what's happening there, but so fundraising turned out to be a little bit easier because of kind of what happened.
Your track record.
And the team has been really good. But the good part about the team is because they had real cred in AI. I could hire other people out of the big places. It's really hard to get talent. So you need an advantage, and the fact that I had a business outcome before doesn't mean that an ML engineer is going to look at me and say, like, I don't care, like, show me somebody else who's got some ML cred. And so we have that now, and it makes it a little bit easier to fight for talent.
So I think when a lot of people think of AI, they think of self-driving cars, they think of a bunch of different applications, and you picked voice, which, in the enterprise world has largely been, I would say, sort of untouched. But in the consumer world, obviously with Alexa and Google Home and some of the other things that are happening, Siri, we've had 5-6 years of sort of introductions of voice as an AI-powered piece of the puzzle. Why hasn't it happened in the enterprise, and why do you think it's going to happen, and how are you guys thinking about that progression?
Yes.
And is the consumer world relevant at all, or is it just completely irrelevant?
No, it really helps because it makes people aware that they can have this AI assistant that's a voice assistant and do something for them. So that definitely helps. But if I had to look at the type of assistants out there, I would break them out into 3 different types. The first one was really if you thought about Google moving to allowing you to do a query by voice. And Siri, this is what I call kind of information-based voice assistants. That at the end of the day, their job is to take a query and issue a result, and voice is just the way in and out of that. So it's information-based. And then Alexa, a lot of its focus has been really around doing an action. Turn on the lights, play a song, that kind of thing, put a timer on.
Order me some cereal.
Order me some cereal, that's right. And people are getting more used to kind of driving some sort of action in the home. What we've been focusing on in the enterprise is you're not speaking to a particular device, and most of the time we've actually evolved that it's really not even you speaking to our assistants called Eva, Enterprise Voice AI. You don't even really speak to Eva. Eva's there in a conversation you're having. So let me back up. Why do we even try to solve this problem? 40% of many people's time is spent in meetings. And meetings are like this time sink where everybody kind of hates the fact that they have to do it, but you have to do it. I mean, you're there to collaborate. And you leave meeting, you go to the next meeting, and by the time you have any time to remember what the heck you agreed on or what actions and decisions you were supposed to take or what the customer wanted, your memory is a little bit faulty, and you haven't really captured everything. And so what we wanted to do is completely change that 40% of your time to make it productive, to be able to automatically issue actions and decisions and push them into your workflow so you get back some time, you get some efficiency about what you're doing. And when we first tested this idea, we actually had a very chatty form of Eva. So you'd be in a meeting, you'd say something, you'd say, okay, Eva, action item, make sure I send the deck after the presentation, and Eva would respond, and got it, and all this kind of interaction. We found that people actually wanted a less chatty Eva. We even created a silent version, which basically just says you capture the action items, there'll be a UI that shows you what's been captured and so on if you want to see kind of closed captioning and stuff like that. But really, we wanted something that would be in the background, capturing things, analyzing things, allowing you after the meeting to get a summary and for you to push it into Slack or Salesforce. So that's one of the major differences with the consumer space, is that if you're in a conversation with multiple people, it's about you and the people, and you having presence and paying attention to the people, not getting distracted with these interactions with Eva. Now, it evolves a little bit. In customer presentations, you want completely silent. In a one-on-one, maybe you're okay having a little bit of interaction. So we're really evolving some of the social dynamic in ways that you wouldn't expect in a kind of consumer assistant.
So just how many people in this room use Alexa or Siri? A lot, high percentage. How many people use some sort of voice-powered AI at work? Anomaly. So there's your market, right? I mean, it's an incredibly attractive market, but it's pretty hard. I mean, you guys have been through a lot of iterations to make this work, and I know one of the things you've always told me is, look, there really isn't like a 98% acceptance rate here. We have to be, 5 nines or better, because people aren't going to rely on this heavily in a work environment if it keeps screwing up. So talk a little bit about how you guys approached solving that, because one of the challenges in the AI world is, we still see some solutions that have a lot of human intervention, and how did you guys think about that, and how are you thinking about that as you go forward? This balance between sort of perfection and human in the loop type scenarios.
Yeah, really good question. If you look at what people will tell you, I meet in conferences all sorts of people, and my favorite one, I won't mention who it was, CEO pulled me aside, he goes, yeah, voice has been solved. I was like, oh my God. Theoretically, maybe. People will publish papers about 90% accuracy, right, in transcription. But then when we run those same systems with the published papers in real world meetings with people dialing in from all over the place, the same systems might produce 60 or 70% accuracy, or 30, 40% word error rates. So in the real world, it's kind of problematic. And when you read some of the transcripts that come out of a single system like this, it reads like Mad Lib, right? It like literally gets you laughing. So we can't have, you might go into your kitchen and ask Alexa to play a song, and it's okay if she plays the wrong song. If you are saying something about a customer interaction and it updates the wrong record at Salesforce, well, that's not okay. So how do we bridge that gap? So we do 3 different things. The first thing we do is we run a real-time transcript on a single engine, which has some of the error rates that we were talking about before, kind of the best available in the market. And that at least gives you the ability to do closed captioning, to see that Eva's been listening, captures what you said, all that's great. Then after the meeting, what we'll do is we'll run multiple engines and produce a learning engine on top of all the engines, we call that an ensemble, that lifts the error rate even higher by a good jump, but it's a little bit more computationally expensive, and it happens not in real time. And then the last thing we do, and this is happening in parallel with all the other things, is if this is part of the 30 seconds of actions that are going to push into Salesforce or Slack or into your email, and all the systems disagree, a human in the loop will error correct a few seconds worth, less than 1% of the total audio. And what that does is it creates labeling for us built into our system that allows our engines to get better and better to identify out of vocabulary words that are specific to your vocabulary, the name of your product, the name of your competitors, so on and so forth, so that the system gets better and better. Maybe 2 years from now we cut out the human in the loop, but what that allows us to do is, 1, continually make the system better, and 2, allow you to be confident to push this into a system like Salesforce with minimal to no review.
So one of the things that we think a lot about as investors in this space is this concept of sort of compounding competitive advantage, right? If you're an early player in an AI category, you are gathering more data than your competitors and building better and better systems, because if you're not in the space and you're not gathering the data, it's really hard to catch up. And so you certainly see this in the self-driving car space, where there's a massive battle taking place to collect that data. How does that apply in this space, and how do you think about that?
It's really good, and the distinction, it might be hard for people to capture. So what's the difference between kind of a competitive advantage or a network effect and a compounding competitive advantage? So let's draw out what won't become a compounding competitive advantage. You have all these users. They're giving you all this data, and supposedly you're getting better and better, but you're retraining all your algorithms once a quarter. That's slow. So a user comes in, makes a mistake today, and for the next 90 days, that mistake keeps getting made. And when you look at a system like ours, or a lot of people creating AI systems, they have lots of opportunities to learn. They're not just one area. And so how do you actually make it so that your systems automatically retrain every day across everything? Really hard, right? Because the engineers are going to want to basically take the new algorithm, test it out, make sure that they don't have all the statistical anomalies that most people have when they try an algorithm. They think it's better, but it's not really in the wild. So how do you automate all that? So most people don't have a compounding competitive advantage. So what does a compounding competitive advantage actually look like? It looks like this. You're talking in a meeting, and the system mistranscribed it because you introduced a new word it never heard, and the next day, automatically, you speak, and it's there. And then the next day, a coworker, they start using Eva, and all of a sudden, they use the same word, and that mistake never got made in the first place to them. And then another coworker comes in and says the same out of vocabulary word with an accent, and then you get it. That stuff is really hard. And candidly, we're not at the state where every single one of our systems is retrained daily. Like that's our North Star, and we're taking each system one by one and trying to automate it. But the amount of automation and testing you have to do, like the unsexy part about ML, everybody wants to go and do the sexy part of ML, but getting all the plumbing right and the statistical judgment of the algorithms and the labeling and making sure that the labeling of the labeling, all that kind of stuff is the unsexy stuff. But if you spend enough time on that infrastructure, you can get to a compounding competitive advantage where your competitors are coming in, they've got a whole bunch of catching up to do, and it's getting worse every day if you make that investment in the infrastructure so they can automatically retrain.
So speaking of competitors, in a space like this, you're naturally going to have folks like Microsoft, IBM, Cisco, and others who are really interested in this space because collaboration is kind of their key cornerstone to their business. What are those folks doing, and how do you think about that as you're building a startup in a space that potentially has a bunch of elephants with multi-billion-dollar businesses that are all around you?
Yeah, so the first thing is I step back and say, who really is the competitor of Voicera? And this insight I learned, actually the word Blue Kai comes from Blue Ocean Strategies. And if you remember Blue Ocean Strategies, one of the stories they talk about is Intuit, where Intuit realized there was all this software for accountants at the time. And they're starting this company, and you would think that they're competing with other software for accountants. They're like, no, you've got this wrong. We're competing with a pencil and paper. The person who sits at home does their own taxes with pencil and paper. And so when you think about Voicera, like what percentage of meetings today have Eva or a competitor to Eva in the meeting helping you capture the notes? Less than 1%. It doesn't matter to me if there's one startup or 100. My real competitor is you being in a meeting, not paying attention to your customer or your partner, and you're writing down. Worse, you have your laptop open, they're saying something, what happens to Facebook updates, email updates, all these updates, and then the person's like, what was the middle thing you said? Right, they're not focusing. That's the competitor, is that practice of what they have today, not the fact that there's a bunch of startups. We've seen a bunch of startups come and go, disappear with funding. We're laser focused on how do we get massive adoption. Now, the big guys. Our strategy has been to try to seek a few of them who might become good partners, and we're really competing at, there's co-opetition, we're using that in the ad world. Our biggest two customers at Blue Kai supposedly were going to be our competitors. They never really were. So here we try to isolate kind of where they're good and we're good, and try to do partnerships, maybe encourage investments. So that's how we've been kind of dancing with the elephants.
You talked about recruiting. How hard is it to recruit talent in the AI and ML space? Because we constantly hear this comment, all the good AI and ML engineers are being sucked up by Facebook and Google. How hard is it out there to recruit in this space?
Hand-to-hand combat. You should be spending a good amount of your time doing this. You can never have a good enough. I mean, my thing with the engineering team is, of course, I have a budget on what they can hire, and I think our CTO has a very high bar on the type of engineers we accept. So with him, I just basically say, you have no budget. Just keep hiring, because I know it's hard for him to find, and he's really picky about finding great people. And so we basically just have this rule, even if you exceed kind of the plan, it's okay, I'll deal with that. I'll deal with the financing, I'll deal with making sure that we're not hiring faster in other places. So it's hand-to-hand combat, you have to prioritize it. And the other thing you can't do is you can't lower your bar, right? You can't, obviously your bar could be too high and unrealistic, I don't mean that, but you can't basically look at it and say, it's hard to hire ML person. Let me find someone who has no clue how to do this and just put the hat on them that says you are now an ML person. Does that mean you can't train people? No, you can't. I'm just saying, don't lower your bar there, because this is hard stuff and you need great people.
So we talked a lot about how you thought about the product, the strategy, building the product. Talk about customers. What's been the experience working with customers? How are you attracting customers? How do you think about pricing this product? Because in some ways you guys are, you're sort of having to advocate a category that people don't understand. I would assume a lot of customers don't understand this, right? They kind of think, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense, but they don't practically, like you just said, less than 1% of people have some sort of voice assistant in a meeting. So how are you both educating the market as well as bringing customers on board and getting feedback from them?
This is a product, unlike lots of things that I've kind of done before and built companies around before, that is super easy to understand. You basically explain to people, focus on the meeting, we'll help you capture the notes, we'll push it to your collaborators, your team members, and we'll push it into other systems. So people get it pretty quick. And the part where they have to think about, which we've become better and better over time, is, okay, how do I engage Eva, right? So, we would make it so you'd have to invite Eva at voicera.com. And then a lot of people would forget to invite Eva. So we added OAuth. Now you can come into it and say, look, I'll just let Eva read the calendar, and Eva will show up automatically to any meeting that has a dial-in or a conference URL to it. That all of a sudden spiked up our usage. And then we're just in the process of rolling out an app, so that if you're in a one-on-one like this and you didn't think of adding a conference call and you just wanted to add it, you just open up the app and you tap and you're done. So we've done all these things to make it easier. We've seen our growth is pretty high, like month to month. Like I'm afraid to quote it because if you ask me next month, I don't know how I can keep that kind of that kind of growth. But it's very high, and I've found that people find it easy. The harder part is pleasing people to the point that, like, the North Star for me is that you actually have a Cliff Notes for the meeting. So Cliff Notes, like if you sat and did a Cliff Notes for a meeting, you'd have to spend a lot of time to get it right so it's satisfactory for a lot of people. Getting to that bar is where we want to get, and it's such a like aspirational goal. We have to do like these proxies of summaries. Proxies of summaries are things that people instantly understand. Oh, this is where I said action, this is where I said decision, this was an introduction. Things that are kind of obvious to look for in the meeting. So I think it's a very understandable category. Our growth has been high, but we're consumerized B2B, meaning we're not selling to enterprises yet. We're basically allowing individuals in an enterprise and teams to use it. It's in beta. We're not even charging until next quarter. And watching the growth, and then talking to the enterprises where we see lots of users, and we go in and basically say, okay, you know, in preparation for when we'll charge, this is how much it costs, and this is how it works, and so on. So consumerized B2B is a really kind of fun thing because it forces you to build products that people understand, that they can use, and that they like. The last part I'll say there that's been super fun, I don't know if anybody from Intercom is in the audience, well, anyway, we use Intercom on our system. And the most fun part of the day is just watching consumer feedback stream in nonstop. And so lots of theories about how I thought the product needed to be built were completely wrong. And I have to say I was fairly confident in those theories. Until, like, you know, then you start seeing the question coming over and over and over and over. I'm like, uncle, okay, I get it. So that's one of the fun parts of running consumerized B2B is you don't have to be right about your strategy. You just have to know how to adjust really fast based on the right consumer input.
So one thing we all deal with in the startup community is investors. How have you found investor understanding of the space that you're going after? And I'd say sort of AI and ML in general, but like as it applies to your, you know, you've met with obviously lots of different VC firms and angel investors along the way. What's been the level of engagement, interest, and understanding, and how have you dealt with that?
Engagement, interest, super high. What I've seen though is two types of reactions. One, I remember once we hadn't launched our beta yet, and we'd have some investors say, this is super, super interesting, and show me your revenue growth on your top 10 customers. Okay. And then you see another type of investor will come in and say,
More than me, right?
Absolutely not. No. No, Jeff and I worked together for he's given us great advice. And the great advice you gave us on this round was your channel comes in terms of driving revenue in later years. Don't depend on early. And I remember tweaking my models on the book. So you've been great partner. So we see with other investors, the opposite side of, you know, you're an alpha, show me your revenue on your top 10 partners, is I don't care about revenue, all I care about is adoption. If you're gonna have any angle that's consumerized in your B2B, this shit has to work well, and it has to be working better every month, and you need to focus on that. And I found that to be useful. Now, if you're building a B2B company, you gotta make money at some point, so you can't go to that extreme for too long. Because by the time you start charging money, if you've delayed it so long, what if you're in the wrong zip code? What if you're completely wrong about how people are going to pay for this? You can't postpone it that long. So I think completely ignoring the revenue side is a problem. So, you know, having investors who are balanced about that is what we look for.
And fair to say most of the folks around the table with your new company are thinking pretty long term, like thinking this is a 10-year trend that's going to play out, and you could be a major player in this category, but it's going to take some time.
Yep, that's
fair.
Right.
Yeah,
that's fair. Yeah, I think people have a long, kind of a long view on how to get this right because it's such a white space opportunity. Because think of all the things you can build on top of this. Once you're in these conversations, capturing important moments, driving them into systems, you flip the model in the enterprise from, okay, everybody who works at this company, here's a 10 piece of software you have to learn how to use. And you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, I hate my first day at work. It flips to, you just speak and this stuff understands you. Like, is it there today? No, absolutely not. Will it get there? Yes, and will it transform how enterprise apps work in a huge way?
So we just have a couple minutes left. What's one thing that people in the audience wouldn't understand or know about what you guys are doing? Like, you don't have to give us any like hidden secrets, but as you've spent the last 2 or 3 years in this space, and other folks are thinking about coming into a space that's related to this, working for your company, working for another company, what are some of the things, the ahas that you guys have picked up as you've gone along that people might not know?
The biggest aha that's kind of been driving us lately is the move from making EVA a lean forward interaction to a lean back interaction. So the lean forward was you had to like mark a moment either by saying kind of a command, okay EVA, we just decided to, something like that, or tap on an interface. So the lean back experience said, you know what, a lot of times people are going to do that. I'd say about 60% of the meetings, people wouldn't do that. They'd want a summary, but they wouldn't have indicated what's important. So we had to design it a little bit different to say, now we're going to produce a transcript of the whole thing, no matter what. Then what we're going to do is we're going to automatically extract moments, even if you didn't tell us explicitly. And when it's done, we're going to send you an email with those moments. So that design change from forcing you to be lean forward to lean back is super interesting. The user's the one who pushed us there, and it's damn hard to do. And we're not done.
Guys, are we about ready to wrap up? 2 minutes? Okay. Anybody have a burning question they want to ask from the audience? No? One right there. I'll repeat it if you just yell it.
How easy it was to connect the voice?
How hard is it to collect voice in the meeting accurately?
Really good question. So when we first started, we made it ubiquitous and easy in that if we just saw any dial-in, we would dial in and capture it using 8K audio. The problem with 8K audio is that the accuracy rates just aren't as good as you'd want. So we've been kind of moving over to 16K by if there's a URL or if there's a conferencing provider, we've been developing partnership with a conference provider and doing other techniques to get into the meeting without dialing in over PSTN, therefore getting much higher quality, and it just raises the bar on accuracy. But we did that in a way where we didn't sacrifice ubiquity. Meaning if we couldn't get the 16K, we went with the 8K. We're also now releasing the app, which is automatically everything is 16K with the app version. So you have to design in different ways to get into different audio environments. So it's not a trivial problem, and it's an important one. Sound quality makes a big difference.
One more right here. Just one. Pick the best one.
Yeah, great question. Do we plan on doing edge computing? I was just thinking about that today because everything we had done was basically in the cloud. But when we roll out the app, there's some things going on in the app. And so it's still pretty heavily cloud. There's an opportunity to push a little bit more into the app. That's kind of unfolding for us. What are the challenges?
How much time do you have?
Yeah, you want to do so. Yeah, I agree that maybe this is an offline conversation. Lots of challenges. You don't want to sap someone's battery on the phone.
Before we got to wrap up quickly. Round of applause. Thank you, Omar, and good luck with everything.